Shalom and welcome back to one of my talks that I give twice a week usually. We're all in the midst of two terrible situations where one, of course, is the pandemic of the coronavirus, which is afflicting us worldwide. The other is, of course, the rioting that is taking place throughout our country here in the United States after the tragic death of a African American man in Minnesota. And the result of that is rioting everywhere throughout the country in many major cities, including here in San Diego. And the question is, how do we deal with this, and what should our reaction to be towards this in a Jewish way? So we certainly know that throughout Jewish history, there have been situations of rioting, murder, and war. For example, during the times of the Torah, the Hittites took Dinah, Jacob's daughter, raped her, and then the two of Jacob's sons, Shimon and Levi, went out and murdered all of them in cold blood, murdered all of the children of Hamor in cold blood. And Jacob frowned on that. And Jacob, to his dying day, did not bless them with the type of blessing that would be appropriate for his sons because of what they did. Later on in history, we find the Bar Kokhba revolution, that the Jewish people rebelled against the Roman oppression in the land of Israel, and many people were killed, and many people were killed in a terrible way by Jews, in fact, during this time. In fact, throughout Jewish history, King David and Jewish generals throughout history have waged war and killed people, and even for land, to get more land. In more modern times, we find there was resistance during the Nazi oppression, and during that time, the Jewish people joined resistance movements. The Belsky brothers and others were in the forest and murdered Nazis and murdered Germans, and even murdered Jewish collaborators in certain cases to save lives. And this was fairly common during that time. The question is, if Jews had the permission to kill Hitler or any Nazi generals at that time, would they have been able to do it? And I think certainly no one would argue that they certainly should have done that, and under certain circumstances like that. And even to steal. If a person is very, very hungry and they can't eat and there's no food to feed their family, they have the right in certain circumstances to steal. I remember once visiting a young man in the federal prison in San Diego who robbed a bank. And I spoke to him, and it turns out his family was starving. His family had no money, had no food. He had a bunch of children at home, and he had no other way to feed them but to go into a bank and to rob the bank. He came before the judge, and the judge had pity on him and only sentenced him, I think, to a few months in jail because of that situation. During the Israeli War of Independence, there were many cases of Jewish resistance. We recall the bombing of the King David Hotel, and many other times when the British soldiers would execute a Jewish fighter, the Jews themselves would go and execute a British soldier, completely, innocent Jewish British soldier, and they would kill him also. So we have done things like that as well throughout history. What is the difference between then and now? And I think the difference is that when we are in a situation of dealing and living in the rule of law, we have to abide by the rule of law. That is, that the laws of a country are the law. Dina de malchusa dina. We've spoken about that before in these videos. That the law in a country that is ruled by law, law must prevail. The policeman who killed this man in Minnesota was arrested. I'll grant you that it was after some protesting, but he was arrested. He will go on trial, and he will face his accusers, and he will be tried in a court of law. So we do believe in justice. We do believe in the rule of law, And therefore, when the rule of law comes along and says that you are not allowed to loot and not allowed to steal and to kill and things like that, we must abide by that rule of law if we're living in such a country. Certainly, what happened to this man was a terrible, terrible thing. And the person who killed him will be held accountable as any situation. And we know that the black community is complaining that this is happening all too frequently throughout the country by police. And the response must be not burning and looting and killing, but accountability. That we need to look and see what are we doing wrong that we are hiring policemen who are capable of doing such things like that and who are running rogue operations on their own. There's something wrong with that our police forces need to look at themselves and see why are we hiring people like that? Not that we should go out and burn and loot and kill, but we should look at ourselves and see what we need to do about it. So I think that when we're dealing with the rule of law is paramount, and it must take preference over anything else. Therefore, what is going on now is very wrong. It's wrong that the police should act in such a way. It's wrong that the looters should loot. And as Jews, we need to condemn both of these actions. They are both wrong. And as long as we are living in a society that is governed by laws and proper ethics, which we are, certainly in the Western world, certainly in our country, these types of behaviors by individuals who are going against the law and doing these things must be condemned in the strongest ways possible. But again, both the police need to be held accountable as well. And that I think is really essentially the Jewish view of what is going on today. We should hope that it should calm down, that those who are responsible in every camp should be held accountable for what they're doing and prosecuted, and that the black community in our country certainly should feel comfortable and safe to be able to go walk around the streets, not fearing the police brutality in any way. And in so doing, we should all live in a very safe and a humane society. So I'd like to wish everyone a good week. I hope everyone had a good Shavuot holiday. We certainly did. And I wish you well for the coming week. And I'll be with you again in a few days towards the end of the week with a synopsis of Shabbos and perhaps some of the events that are going on at that time as well. Good week, everybody. Shavuot Tov.